She took the promise ring I gave her and pawned it for cash. When I found out, she said, "Don't be mad, it was just sitting there." I just smiled. But weeks later, she learned exactly who was wearing the new one. I noticed the empty space on her nightstand first. The small, velvet-lined box where she was supposed to keep the promise ring was open and vacant. It was the first ring I had ever designed and crafted myself, from the initial sketch to the final polish. When I asked her where it was, she didn't even have the decency to look guilty. She just shrugged, a casual, dismissive gesture that ripped the air out of my lungs. "Oh, that? I needed some cash for this marketing seminar, so I pawned it." I just stared at her, waiting for the punchline. It never came. She saw the look on my face and rolled her eyes. "Don't be mad," she said, her voice laced with annoyance. "It was just sitting there." I didn't explode. I didn't even raise my voice. A strange, cold calm washed over me, and I smiled, a real, genuine smile. Because in that single, brutal moment of clarity, she hadn't just given me an excuse. She had given me an idea. A brilliant, terrible idea. She thought the ring was just an object. She was about to learn that a symbol has power, and in a few weeks she wasn't just going to see a new ring, she was going to see it on the one person in the world she never wanted to see succeed, and she would finally understand what it feels like when a promise is truly kept. My life is built on promises. As a custom jeweler, my clients don't just buy a piece of metal and stone from me, they buy a symbol. They buy a story forged in fire and pressure, meant to last a lifetime. I'm 38, and I've spent the last decade building my business from a small bench in my garage to a respected private studio downtown. My hands are calloused, and my eyes are trained to see the smallest flaw, the slightest imperfection. I thought my relationship with Amber, my girlfriend of 2 years, was as solid as the gold I work with. Amber is 31. When we met, she was working in retail, full of big dreams, but with no real plan. She talked about starting her own event planning business, about being a boss, about creating beautiful experiences. I believed in that dream. I paid for her to take business courses, helped her build a website, and introduced her to my network of clients. For the first year, things were great. I thought we were building a future. She moved into my house, the one I bought and renovated myself, 8 months ago. The shift was subtle at first. Her business seemed to consist mostly of long lunches and networking events that never led to actual clients. She started talking less about her dreams and more about the things she deserved. A new car, a bigger wardrobe, trips she saw other influencers taking on Instagram. I was paying for everything, the mortgage, the bills, her car payment, her credit card, all under the assumption that this was a temporary investment while her business got off the ground. I see now that I wasn't an investor, I was a grant. The promise ring was something I made for our 1-year anniversary. It wasn't extravagant, but it was personal. A simple, elegant band of white gold with a small, perfect sapphire, her birthstone, set in the center. I'd spent over 100 hours on it, sketching designs, sourcing the stone, and crafting it by hand. It was a piece of me, a tangible promise of a future I intended to build with her. She seemed to love it. She cried when I gave it to her. Last week, I noticed she wasn't wearing it. When I asked, she said she'd taken it off to clean it and forgot to put it back on. A day later, I saw the empty box. That's when the confrontation happened. No remorse, no apology, just that cold, dismissive excuse. It was just sitting there. She had taken a piece of my soul, a symbol of my commitment, and liquidated it for a few $100s to attend a seminar that was likely just another excuse to drink cocktails and take selfies. The disrespect was absolute. It wasn't a mistake, it was a fundamental statement about her character. She saw my love as a commodity. After she went out that night to meet a potential client, I went into her home office, a room I designed and furnished for her. It took me less than 5 minutes to find the pawn ticket tucked into her planner. She'd gotten $400 for it. $400 for a piece that had cost me thousands in materials and 100 hours of my life. The ticket had the name and address of the pawn shop. My professional mind took over from the emotional one. The relationship was a failed project. It was time to cut my losses and demolish the structure. First, I secured my assets. I logged into my bank accounts. I froze the joint credit card we had, or household expenses. I transferred the balance from our joint checking account, all of which was my money, into my personal savings. I changed the password to the Wi-Fi. I logged her out of the streaming services. The small comforts she took for granted were the first to go. Second, I did some research. This marketing seminar she was so desperate to attend, a quick search revealed it was a 3-day event in Las Vegas, hosted by some self-proclaimed guru who specialized in teaching women how to manifest a luxury lifestyle. The tickets were $500. She was still short. She'd pawned a piece of our future and couldn't even cover the full cost of her scam seminar. It was pathetic. Third, and this was the most important step, I began to design. I sat down at my workbench, the place where I had created her ring, and I started sketching. But this time, I wasn't designing a ring for Amber. I was designing a ring about Amber. It would be a masterpiece of symbolic revenge, a story told in gold and stone. She came home late that night, humming, and didn't even notice the cold silence in the house. She didn't notice that the Wi-Fi was off or that I didn't speak to her. She just went to bed, wrapped in a cocoon of her own entitlement. Let her sleep, let her dream of her luxury lifestyle. I was wide awake, and I was about to craft a reality that was far more valuable, and for her, far more devastating. Update 1. 1 week later. The support from this community has been a fire in the forge, hardening my resolve. Many of you have shared your own stories of betrayal, and it's a grim comfort to know I'm not alone. The day after I discovered the pawn ticket was a day of quiet, methodical action. I went to the pawn shop. It was a sad, dusty place that smelled of desperation. I showed the owner my business card and the original design sketches for the ring, along with the receipt for the sapphire. I wasn't there to buy it back. I was there to document. The owner, a weary-looking man named Sal, remembered Amber. "Yeah, she came in a few days ago," he said, looking at the ticket. Said it was from an old boyfriend that had had bad memories. The lie was so effortless for her. I asked Sal if I could see the security footage. I explained the situation, that it was a custom piece stolen from my home, and that I was building a case. He was surprisingly cooperative. He showed me the video. There she was, smiling, laughing with him as she signed the paperwork, handing over the ring without a moment's hesitation. I had him make me a copy. Evidence. I didn't buy the ring back. Letting it sit there, an emblem of her cheap betrayal in a dusty glass case, felt right. It was where it belonged now. When I got home, Amber was in a panic. Her credit card had been declined when she tried to buy her plane ticket to Vegas. She was furious, demanding to know what was wrong with our account. "There's nothing wrong with my account," I said, my voice even. "I've simply secured it. The joint card has been canceled." "Canceled?" she shrieked. "Why would you do that? How am I supposed to buy my ticket?" "That sounds like a personal problem, Amber, not a joint one." "This is because of the ring, isn't it?" she spat, finally realizing this was a calculated move, not a glitch. "I can't believe you're being so petty over a piece of jewelry." "It wasn't just jewelry, and you know it," I said. I pulled out the pawn ticket and tossed it on the table in front of her. "You got $400 for it. I hope it was worth it." The sight of the ticket shut her down. The anger drained away, replaced by a flicker of fear. She had been caught, and the consequences were starting to manifest. She tried to pivot to tears, saying she was desperate, that she would pay me back. I just shook my head. "No, you won't. We're done. I want you out of my house." "You can't kick me out," she cried. "I have nowhere to go." "You have 30 days, I said, handing her a formal, printed eviction notice, as she was legally a tenant. "I suggest you start looking for a new place to live and a new source of income. My sponsorship has ended." The next week was a tense, miserable affair. She stayed, mostly confined to the guest room, alternating between hostile silence and tearful, manipulative apologies. She didn't go to her seminar. She couldn't afford it. Instead, she spent her days on the phone with her friends, loudly complaining about how cruel and controlling I was being. Meanwhile, I worked. I spent every spare moment in my studio, bringing my new design to life. The revenge piece. It was a necklace, not a ring. A stunning, intricate pendant crafted from platinum. At its center, I set a deep, blood-red ruby, a stone symbolizing passion and rage. Surrounding the ruby, I set a halo of tiny, flawless black diamonds, representing the darkness and deceit of her actions. It was the most beautiful and most menacing piece I had ever created. It was a story of betrayal, made immortal in metal and stone. And I knew exactly who was going to wear it. Amber has a younger sister, Qley. Qley is everything Amber is not. She's quiet, hardworking, and kind. She's a nurse, and she has a gentle strength that I've always admired. Amber has always been deeply, poisonously jealous of her. She sees Qley's simple, responsible life as a judgment on her own chaotic one. She constantly belittles her, calls her boring, and mocks her practical choices. Qley and I had always been friendly. She was the only member of Amber's family who ever treated me with genuine warmth. She had called me a few days after the blow-up, having heard Amber's hysterical, one-sided version of events. I told her the truth, calmly and with the facts to back it up. She was quiet for a long time, and then she just said, "I'm so sorry, David. You didn't deserve that." I asked her to meet me for coffee. She was hesitant, not wanting to get in the middle, but she agreed. I showed her the necklace. Her eyes went wide. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "But who is it for?" "It's for you," I said. Update 2. 2 weeks later, Qley was stunned. She stared at the necklace, then at me, her expression a mix of confusion and disbelief. "Thank you to everyone here for the continued support. This has been a strange path to walk, but your comments have been a guide." "For me?" Qley asked, her voice barely a whisper. "David, I can't accept this. It's too much." "It's not a romantic gift, Qley," I explained, my voice gentle but firm. "I need you to understand that. This is a thank you for being a good person, for the kindness you've shown me when no one else in your family would. And it's a symbol. Your sister took a promise I made and treated it like trash. I wanted to create a new promise, a promise that decency and hard work, the things you represent, are what's truly valuable." She was still hesitant. "But Amber, she'll lose her mind." "Yes, she will," I said, "and frankly, that's part of the point. She needs to see this. She needs to understand what she threw away. I want you to wear it to your parents' anniversary party next Saturday." The party, it was the perfect stage. The one big family event of the summer. Amber was planning on going, of course. It was her chance to play the victim, to tell everyone her sob story about her cruel ex. She had no idea what was waiting for her. Qley thought about it for a long time, turning the heavy platinum pendant over in her hands. "She's been awful to me my whole life," she said quietly. "Always trying to make me feel small. Always jealous of anything good that happened to me." She looked up at me, a new determination in her eyes. "Okay, I'll do it." The week leading up to the party was the final week of Amber's eviction notice. The tension in the house was unbearable. She had found a small, cheap apartment across town, and the reality of her new life was hitting her hard. The freelance event planning business was a fantasy. She had no clients, no income, and no savings. She had started asking me for money, for an extension, for anything. I refused. On the day of the party, she was a wreck. She spent hours on her hair and makeup, putting on a brave face, a costume of success that was paper thin. I was also going to the party, for one reason only, to watch the final act. We drove separately. When I walked into her parents' backyard, the party was in full swing. Amber was already holding court, surrounded by a circle of sympathetic relatives, no doubt spinning her tale of woe. I just nodded politely to her parents and got a drink, positioning myself with a clear view of the entrance. 10 minutes later, Qley arrived. She was wearing a simple, elegant black dress, and against her skin, the ruby and black diamond necklace was a supernova. It was breathtaking. The blood-red ruby seemed to pulse with a life of its own, and the black diamonds glittered like a dark constellation. It was impossible to miss. The reaction was immediate. Conversations stuttered and stopped. People turned to stare. Amber's mother was the first to approach her. "Qley, my goodness, where did you get that?" Qley just smiled. "It was a gift." Amber saw it then. I watched her face as she processed the scene. The confusion, the dawning realization, the pure, unadulterated rage. She marched across the lawn, her face a thundercloud. "Where did you get that?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "David gave it to me," Qley said, her voice calm and clear, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Amber's head snapped towards me. I just raised my glass in a silent toast. You gave her a necklace?" Amber stammered, her mind clearly struggling to catch up. "He did," Qley said, her confidence growing. He said he wanted to create a new symbol, a symbol of what's actually valuable. Kindness, integrity, things you wouldn't understand. The story was out now. The whispers turned into a roar. People were looking from the necklace to Amber, to me, connecting the dots. Her uncle, a man I'd always respected, walked over to me. "Son," he said, his voice low, "her father told me some story about you two having a fight. What really happened?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the picture of the security footage. Amber at the pawn shop, smiling as she sold my promise ring. He stared at it for a long time, his face hardening. He walked away without a word and went straight to his brother, Amber's father. The party imploded. Amber was screaming at Qley, calling her a traitor. Her father was trying to pull her away, his face beet red with embarrassment. Her mother looked like she was about to faint. I just stood there watching the fire I had so carefully built consume everything. Amber had pawned a symbol of our future for a few $100s. In return, I had created a new symbol, a priceless one, and used it to expose her for exactly who she was, in front of everyone she had tried to deceive. She hadn't just lost a ring, she had lost her family's respect, her sister's loyalty, and any shred of the victim narrative she had tried to create. Final update. 3 months later. It's been 3 months since the anniversary party. My life has been blissfully quiet. The house is my own again, and the peace is something I'll never take for granted. I wanted to post one final update to close this chapter. The fallout from that party was, as you can imagine, catastrophic for Amber. The story of her pawning my ring and the subsequent public reveal of the new necklace on her sister became the stuff of family legend. She was completely ostracized. Her parents, embarrassed and furious, apparently gave her an ultimatum: get a real job and start therapy, or she was completely on her own. Her new life is a far cry from the luxury she felt she deserved. She's working as a receptionist at a dental office. She had to sell her car and now takes the bus. Her social media, once a curated feed of glamorous brunches and fake business meetings, is now silent. She lost her audience, both online and in real life. Qley has been the unexpected hero of this story. Wearing that necklace gave her a confidence I'd never seen before. She stood up to Amber and to her parents for the first time in her life. Our friendship has become a solid, genuine bond. We have dinner once a week. She still wears the necklace, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of her own strength. It looks better on her than I ever could have imagined. As for the original ring, I went back to the pawn shop a month ago. It was still there, sitting in the dusty case. I bought it back. Not for sentimental reasons, but for the materials. I took it back to my studio, melted down the white gold, and removed the sapphire. The metal was tainted, the promise it represented broken beyond repair. I used the reclaimed gold and the sapphire to create a small, simple pair of earrings. I gave them to my mother for her birthday. I told her the story. She just hugged me and said, "You took something ugly and made it beautiful again. That's who you are." I did get one final pathetic text from Amber a few weeks ago. I saw Qley's Instagram. She's wearing the necklace. "I hope you're both happy. You ruined my life." I typed back a simple reply. "I didn't ruin your life, Amber. I just stopped paying for it." Then I blocked her number for good. The revenge was complete. It wasn't about the money or the drama. It was about the symbolism. She took a promise and sold it for pocket change. I took her betrayal and forged it into a masterpiece that celebrated the very qualities she lacked. She tried to reduce my love to a price tag, and in the end, she's the one who was left completely worthless. She learned that some things can't be bought or sold, and some promises, once broken, are reforged into something much stronger. She tried to sue me after we broke up and told everyone, "He's too broke to fight back." I stayed quiet, but when she saw my counterclaim in court, she realized she'd just destroyed herself. Our business relationship and my 2-year personal relationship with my now ex ended over a $5,000 sofa. Not just any sofa. A vintage Italian leather thing that looked like it belonged in a museum and was about as comfortable as sitting on a pile of rocks. She bought it with the company credit card. When I asked her why a business that sold artisanal coffee beans needed a sofa that cost more than our first espresso machine, she just waved her hand dismissively. "It's about branding, sweetie. People need to see we have taste." That was Amber for you. All style, zero substance. We started the daily grind together. My idea, my life savings for the initial investment. I handled the boring stuff. Sourcing the beans, managing inventory, payroll, the website backend, all the things that actually make a business run. She was the face. She ran the social media, designed the packaging, and charmed the customers at our small, trendy storefront. It worked for a while. The business grew. But as it grew, so did her sense of entitlement. The sofa was the last straw. I told her she had to pay the company back for it. She laughed in my face. The fight was ugly. It ended with me saying we were done, both personally and professionally. I changed the locks on the store that night and took her name off the company accounts. I was the majority owner, 80-20, a fact she seemed to conveniently forget. I thought that was the end of it. Then, about a month later, I was served with a lawsuit. She was suing me for full ownership of the business, plus damages for emotional distress and wrongful termination of a partnership. It was a completely frivolous, insane claim. But the worst part was what she started telling everyone. Our mutual friends, our suppliers, even some of our regular customers. She'd put on her best sad, brave face and tell them how I had stolen her company, how I had used her for her creative genius, and then thrown her away. And the line she used the most, the one that got back to me from 3 different people, was this. "It's fine though," she'd say with a confident smirk. "He's too broke to fight back. He'll have to settle. The store will be mine by Christmas." She thought I was broke because I live a simple life. I drive a 10-year-old truck. I live in a modest, rented apartment. I don't wear designer clothes. I thought it was smarter to reinvest every spare dollar back into the business or into quiet, long-term stock investments. She saw my lack of flash as a lack of cash. It was a fatal miscalculation on her part. I didn't argue with anyone. I didn't defend myself on social media. I just stayed quiet. I let her build her narrative. I let her think she was winning. I let her believe I was cornered and weak. She had no idea that I had taken her declaration of war and was preparing a response so overwhelming, so utterly devastating, that by the time it was over, she wouldn't just lose her lawsuit. She would lose everything. She wanted a fight. I was going to give her a slaughter. Update 1. It's been 2 months since Amber filed her ridiculous lawsuit. In that time, she's been on a one-woman PR tour, painting me as the villain of the century. She's been posting vague, inspirational quotes on Instagram about knowing your worth and rising from the ashes, all while telling anyone who would listen that I'm a broke, pathetic loser who is about to learn a very expensive lesson. Thanks for the comments and support on the first post. For those of you asking why I didn't just shut her down immediately, it's simple. You don't interrupt your enemy when they are making a mistake. Every lie she told, every person she slandered me to, was just another nail she was hammering into her own coffin. The first thing I did after being served wasn't panic. It was to hire the best, most ruthless business litigation lawyer in the city. A guy named David Chen. He's the kind of lawyer other lawyers are afraid of. During our first meeting, I laid out the entire history of the business. I had brought a hard drive with me, containing every financial record, every email, every text message from the past 2 years. David listened patiently, his face unreadable. When I was done, he asked me a simple question. "What do you want to get out of this?" "I want her out of my life and my business permanently," I said. "And I want her to learn that her actions have consequences." He nodded slowly. "We can do that. Her lawsuit is a joke. We can get it dismissed, but that's defense. You don't strike me as a man who likes to play defense." "I don't," I confirmed. "Good," he said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. "Then we don't just defend, we attack. We file a counterclaim so strong, so well documented, that she will have no choice but to beg for a settlement." That's when the real work began. Amber's lawsuit was based on the lie that the business was her idea and her creation. Our original partnership agreement, which David called beautifully clear, stated that I was the 80% owner and she was the 20% owner, and that I had provided 100% of the initial capital. That alone would get her case thrown out. But that wasn't enough. I wanted to go on the offensive. David advised me to hire a forensic accountant, a specialist who could go through our books with a fine-tooth comb. I hired the best firm in the state. For 3 weeks, an accountant named Maria basically lived in my back office. She went through every single transaction from the day we opened, every credit card swipe, every check, every cash withdrawal. While she worked, I started compiling the other evidence. Amber had been careless. She thought I was just the boring numbers guy who never paid attention. But I see everything. I had emails where she explicitly referred to the business as your company when she wanted me to pay for something. I had text messages where she talked about her 20% stake. I also reached out to a few former employees who had quit because of her. They were more than happy to provide signed affidavits about her behavior, how she would show up late, leave early, and treat the business's cash register like her personal ATM. One former barista testified that she saw Amber take a few $100s from the till to pay for a speeding ticket. The public smearing was another angle. Her claim that I was too broke to fight back wasn't just an insult, it was slander. David explained that since I was a business owner, her lies could be seen as damaging to my professional reputation and creditworthiness. We started documenting every instance. We got screenshots of her social media posts. We even had a mutual friend who was willing to testify under oath that Amber had told him she was going to bankrupt me with legal fees. Then the forensic accountant finished her report. She presented it to me and David in a thick, bound document that felt as heavy as a tombstone. It was worse than I could have ever imagined. It wasn't just the sofa. Over 2 years, Amber had misappropriated a staggering $92,000 from the business. It was all there, in black and white. Lavish dinners with her friends charged as client meetings. A weekend trip to a spa resort listed as attending a trade conference. Thousands of dollars in designer clothes and handbags coded as uniforms and supplies. She had been systematically bleeding my company dry, funding her glamorous lifestyle with the money I had worked day and night to build. David Chen looked at the final number in the report, then looked at me. "This is it," he said, his voice quiet with excitement. "This isn't just a counterclaim, this is a public execution." We were ready. Her lawyers had been sending arrogant, demanding letters for weeks. We had responded with polite, formal requests for documentation of her claims, which of course they couldn't provide. They thought our silence was a sign of weakness. They thought we were scrambling. They had no idea we were quietly building a legal nuke. The counterclaim was drafted. It didn't just ask for her lawsuit to be dismissed. It demanded repayment of the $92,000 she had embezzled, plus punitive damages for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty, plus damages for defamation, and all of our legal fees. The total amount we were demanding was well over $250,000. The papers were filed last week. Her lawyers would have received them on Monday. I imagine their week has been difficult. We have a preliminary hearing scheduled in 2 weeks. Amber wanted a fight. She's about to find out she brought a knife to a gunfight, and my gun is a cannon. Final update. The end was a masterpiece of legal devastation. I'm sitting in my apartment, the one Amber thought was so beneath her, and I'm drinking a very good, very expensive bottle of scotch that I bought to celebrate. It's over. And the outcome was more satisfying than I ever could have dreamed. Our day in court wasn't a full-blown trial. It was a mandatory settlement conference with a mediator, a retired judge named Arthur Vance. The goal was to see if we could reach an agreement before wasting the court's time with a trial. Amber arrived with her lawyer, looking like she was heading to a movie premiere. She was wearing a brand new designer dress, smiling and confident. She was performing. She genuinely believed she was the star of this show, the wronged heroine about to get her vindication. She even had the audacity to give me a pitying little smile as she walked past. We all sat down in a conference room. Her lawyer started things off. He launched into a dramatic speech about Amber's creative vision, how she was the heart and soul of the daily grind, and how I, the talentless money man, was trying to steal her brilliant creation. He painted a picture of her as a young, vulnerable artist being crushed by a cold, calculating businessman. It was a good story. Too bad it was complete fiction. When he was done, the mediator looked at my lawyer, David. David didn't make a speech. He just slid a single, thick, professionally bound document across the table. It was the forensic accountant's report. Before we discuss my client's response to this frivolous lawsuit, David said, his voice calm and level, I believe it's important for everyone to understand the facts. This report details a 2-year pattern of systematic embezzlement and fraud perpetrated by the plaintiff, Ms. Daniels, against the company she is now claiming to be the victim of. Amber's lawyer scoffed. We're not going to be intimidated by some trumped-up accounting tricks. Tricks? David asked, raising an eyebrow. He then handed a second, much thicker binder to the mediator. This is our counterclaim, Your Honor. It includes the full accountant's report, as well as sworn affidavits from 3 former employees, screenshots of defamatory social media posts, and a detailed breakdown of every dollar Ms. Daniels stole from the business. The mediator, Judge Vance, put on his reading glasses and started flipping through the counterclaim. The room was silent for a long time. Amber was still trying to look confident, but she was starting to fidget. Her lawyer was whispering to her, probably telling her it was all a bluff. Judge Vance stopped on a page. He looked up, his eyes locking on Amber. Miss Daniels, he said, his voice quiet, but carrying the weight of decades on the bench. On page 47 of this report, there's an entry for a charge of $7,800 to a boutique in Paris, charged to the company credit card. The expense was coded as packaging prototypes. Can you explain to me what kind of coffee packaging costs almost $8,000? That was the moment. The instant the entire world shifted under her feet. Her face turned white. Not just pale, a ghastly, bloodless white. The smirk, the confidence, the arrogance, it all just melted away, replaced by the raw, bug-eyed terror of a cornered animal. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked at her lawyer, but he was staring at the report. His own face a mask of dawning horror. He'd clearly been lied to as much as I had. I'll ask another one, Judge Vance said, his voice hardening. There's also a series of cash withdrawals totaling over $15,000, all made within a few blocks of the city's most popular nightclubs, usually after midnight. These were logged as emergency supply runs. What kind of coffee supplies are only available for cash in the middle of the night, Ms. Daniels? She just shook her head, muttering, I don't remember. The judge closed the binder with a soft thud that sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. He looked at her lawyer. Counselor, he said, his voice laced with ice, your client has filed a frivolous, bad faith lawsuit. The defendant has responded with a counterclaim that appears to be not only valid, but potentially indicative of criminal activity. I suggest you take your client into another room and explain to her the legal definitions of perjury, fraud, and embezzlement. You have 10 minutes to come back with an offer to drop this lawsuit and discuss a settlement for the counterclaim, or my official recommendation will be to dismiss your case with prejudice and refer this matter to the district attorney's office. Her lawyer practically dragged her out of the room. I could hear her start to sob as soon as the door closed. David and I just sat there. He took a sip of water. I think that went well, he said. They came back 10 minutes later. Amber was a wreck, her makeup streaked with tears. Her lawyer looked like he had aged 10 years. They agreed to drop their lawsuit immediately. They spent the next hour begging us to be lenient on the counterclaim. The final settlement was brutal. She had to sign over her 20% of the business to me for the sum of $1. She had to sign a legally binding confession of the embezzlement, agreeing to a payment plan to pay back the full $92,000. It will take her the rest of her life. She also had to issue a public apology on all her social media channels, retracting her lies about me and the business. And finally, she was responsible for paying a portion of my legal fees. She destroyed herself. Her greed, her arrogance, her belief that I was weak and stupid. It all led her to this. She tried to ruin me, and instead she's in debt for the foreseeable future. Her reputation is in tatters, and she has nothing to show for it. The business is doing better than ever. I rebranded, brought in a new manager, and we're even opening a second location. I'm free. And I learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes, the quietest people have the loudest ammunition. You just have to wait for the right moment to fire.